the Bible is much for you. I mean, you say tonight, I have a right to every promise in the Bible. God didn't give some promises to preachers and some to lay people. I have a right to it. And I'm going to rise up and claim it. It's rightly mine. And then you say tonight, I'm going to let God be God in my life. And then you say tonight, I'm not going to limit the Holy One of Israel. God's promises are not limited to preachers. They're for postmen and plumbers and professors. God's promises are for mechanics and merchants and mill workers. God's promises are for barbers and bakers and butlers. God's promises are for carpenters and carriers and cleaners. God's promises are for servicemen and secretaries and seamstresses. God's promises are for sailors and soldiers and stock clerks. God's promises are for teachers and teamsters and telemarketers. God's promises are for maids and mailmen and maitre d's. God's promises are for clerks and clerics and custodians. God's promises are for waiters and waitresses and watchmen. God's promises are for electricians, entrepreneurs, and engineers. God's promises are for bankers and beauticians and bricklayers. God's promises are for firemen and farmers and factory workers. God's promises are for policemen and peddlers and professionals. God's promises are for doctors and dentists and druggists. God's promises are for lawyers and loan keepers and loggers. God's promises are for truck drivers and trainmen and teamsters. God's promises are for nurses and night watchmen and navigators. God's promises are for pilots and politicians and planners. God's promises are for landscapers and lawn mowers and land movers. God's promises are for osteopaths, optometrists, and opticians. It's for you. Prayer power is for you. Soul winning is for you. Holy Spirit power is for you. All of God's promises are for you. I'm a little tired of these dispensationalists that break down the Bible into parts and say this promise was for the Jews and this promise was for the Old Testament and this promise was dispensation of law. And God calls them to get lockjaw. It was Vance Havner who said, he says, as a new Christian, I started claiming this promise. And somebody walked up and said, that's not for you, that's for the Jews. And so I claimed this promise over here, and somebody said, that's not for you, that's for another dispensation. Vance Havner said, good night, I was getting answers on those promises for years before I found out they weren't for me. It's for you.